You know, some people write poetry to create beautiful fantasies, and then there are people who take a sledgehammer to those fantasies. Today, we're talking about one of those people, George Crabbe, the poet who killed a myth. So, to really get why Crabbe was such a game changer, you have to picture the world he was writing in. Back in the 18th century, pastoral poetry was all the rage, and it basically painted country life as this perfect, peaceful dream, a kind of rustic paradise where everything was simple and beautiful. On one hand, you had this popular pastoral dream, right? Full of happy shepherds, gorgeous scenery, just idyllic. But then, on the other hand, was the reality George Crabbe actually saw and wrote about. We're talking starvation, disease, exploited workers, and just raw human suffering. He wasn't just writing something different, he was pretty much declaring war on a fantasy. And into this world of perfect, polished poems steps this guy, George Crabbe. He was a poet, sure, but he was also a clergyman, and he'd been a surgeon's apprentice. He saw the real hardships of the working class, the people that mainstream literature just ignored. And he decided, no, their stories are the ones that really need to be told. So how'd he do it? Well, his career was basically launched by one single, powerful poem that cemented his reputation as the poet of unfiltered, harsh reality. In 1783, Crabbe drops The Village, and its purpose couldn't have been more direct. It was written as an explicit takedown of the sentimental stuff his contemporaries were writing. Poets like Oliver Goldsmith, who painted the countryside in these soft, lovely colors. Crabbe was about to repaint that whole picture in shades of grimy, brutal gray. And wow, he did not pull any punches. You have to imagine the shock value here. For readers who are used to romantic, feel-good escapism, Crabbe's descriptions of rural life must have been absolutely jaw-dropping. He was forcing them to look at the very truths they've been paying poets to help them ignore. After establishing his reputation for gritty realism, Crabbe didn't just stop. He wasn't a one-hit wonder. He actually spent the rest of his career building on this project, creating these incredibly detailed chronicles of everyday life. So in 1807, he comes out with The Parish Register. The concept is simple, but honestly, it's brilliant. He took the official records of a village, the town's logbook, and used that as a framework to tell the real, unvarnished stories of the people living there. No sugarcoating, just life as it actually was. The poem is structured in 3 parts, mirroring the register itself: births, marriages, and deaths. And through these simple, official records, Crabbe gives us these powerful little snapshots of joy and struggle and sorrow, capturing the whole messy spectrum of being human. Then, in 1810, he releases what a lot of people consider his absolute masterpiece, The Burrow. This thing was his most ambitious project by far, a collection of 24 separate poems, each one painting a portrait of a specific person or social type inside a single coastal town. Everybody from the priest to the poorest widow gets a story. And within that massive collection is one story that is echoed through the centuries. It's this dark, fascinating character study that really shows Crabbe at the absolute height of his powers. We're talking about the tale of Peter Grimes. He's a cruel, abusive fisherman, a total outcast in his community. But the story isn't just about his cruelty. It's about what happens inside his head after his young apprentices die while under his care. Crabbe takes us deep, and I mean deep, into a complete psychological collapse. We see his cruelty, which leads to his isolation from everyone else. But then, that isolation feeds a haunting guilt, which finally just boils over into this maddening, all-consuming remorse. It's a stunningly modern look inside a tormented soul. The story's psychological power was so immense, so ahead of its time, that over a century later, it inspired the famous composer Benjamin Britten to create his opera, Peter Grimes, and that cemented this character's place in cultural history forever. So, what's the ultimate takeaway from Crabbe's work? Why does this poet of grim reality still matter to us all these years later? Well, Crabbe carved out a completely unique space for himself. In an age of fantasy, he chose facts. In a time that celebrated the elite, he gave a voice to the poor and forgotten. It's that deep compassion for human suffering in all its forms that makes his work absolutely timeless. And his influence was profound. This commitment to social realism directly paved the way for some of the biggest Victorian writers who came after him. We're talking literary giants like Thomas Hardy and Alfred Tennyson.
Crabbe showed them it was not only possible, but essential to write about the world as it truly was.
Which kind of leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? Crabbe had the courage to tell the truths his society really wanted to ignore. It makes you wonder, 2 centuries later, what are the uncomfortable realities, the inconvenient truths, that our artists today might just be afraid to show us?